Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Sharon Shaloo. Welcome. Thanks for coming in from your busy schedule. Sharon Shaloo is the Executive Director of the Mass Center for the Book, and located in Boston. And every year, Mass Book presents the Mass Book Awards that honors writers in the Commonwealth and beyond. A recent resident, she's a resident, not a recent resident of Arlington now, and as a member of the Tourism and Economic Committee still, or?
I am still a member of the committee, yeah.
And you worked on a literary map of the state, which includes landmarks from every city and town in the Commonwealth. You got your undergraduate degree from Rutgers University. You lived in Indiana, New York City, and Europe, right? You lived in Europe and participated in a teaching exchange in London. And now, of course, you decide to settle on our next-door neighbor, Arlington, Mass. So thank you for joining us. You know, I just got an announcement over the internet from your organization saying that you're up for some funding and concerned about we get adequate funding and things like that. And it's such a great organization. I'm wondering what you would suggest that people do in order to make sure you're funded for the company.
Oh, gosh. Let's just jump right into it. So thanks for having me. Yeah. So we should always talk about the funding first. Mass Center for the Book was established in the year 2000. And for the first 12 to 14 years of our operations, funding was coming, our base funding for operations was coming through other budget lines in the state budget. That became really tough when funding was strained in other places. And 3 years ago, we developed a dedicated line to fund Mass Center for the Book modestly within the library constellation of the state budget. So right now, and this is the third year actually this has happened, we have been provided funding in the House budget and not provided funding in the Senate budget. So we right now are waiting the outcome of the conference committee, the budget conference committee. So if anybody, after you listen to us today, if you think that this is a worthy cause, I'd encourage you to write to your state representative and your state senator and encourage him or her, both of them, to support 7,095.08, the line that funds administration of Mass Center for the Book. You can see us on Facebook. It's all there.
Now, you know, there are many awards, and book awards and all kinds of literary awards. Why do you feel your Mass Book Award is unique, and why is it needed? And I know it's needed, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Oh, it's fine. I think I played devil's advocate when we were establishing it as well. We were established by a consortium of library and educational and humanities organizations back in 2000. And as we were thinking about the way that we wanted to develop Mass Center for the Book, we thought it was very important for, I should back up to say, the Center for the Book, our state Center for the Book, like every state Center for the Book, there's a center in every state in the country, as well as in the District of Columbia and in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're all affiliated with the Center for the Book in the Library of Congress, and we do outreach programming to promote books, reading, literacy, and libraries. We are very much bound to our state library community and to our national library network. So as we talked about where the center could find its best impact in the state, we wanted to develop programs that would put libraries in partnership with other organizations and with other institutions. And that's what the Book Awards have always meant to do, to put librarians in collaboration with booksellers, humanists, critics, reviewers, to develop, identify, and promote the best that's being written in and about Massachusetts each year. We mean
yes, and I mean, the writer doesn't have to necessarily live in Massachusetts, but if he's writing about Massachusetts,
we followed the lead of the longest-running state book awards in the country in Oklahoma, and their model was that the writer had to be a resident of the state, or the book had to be about the state. So it's not a free-for-all, all comers, but in the very first year, for instance, there was a wonderful kids' book, Henry Hikes to Fitchburg, that emerged from a passage from Henry David Thoreau's Walden. and it was written by and illustrated by D.B. Johnson, and he happened to live across the line in New Hampshire. But there's no doubt that that's a Massachusetts book. So so we do that.
So it's not like if you just say Massachusetts in one line out of 100.
No, and I will tell you, and very funny. I mean, in the beginning, we used to get submissions. You know, the book was about a beach. Well, we have beaches in Massachusetts. No, that's not going to work. But you know, histories, biographies of important people.
And what are the categories again? You have poetry, I know, being a poet. What else? Fiction?
We have 4 categories: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and children's/young adult literature. Some years we split the picture books out from the middle grade young adult books in the children's category and have 5 awards, and other years we don't. We actually get an enormous number of books each year. We are by far the largest state book awards program in the country. But I want to just go back to a minute to say why they're necessary. I think that librarians and libraries can do that work of supporting our writing community. And we find the books that we think will have currency among readers in libraries. Our award winners become part of our cultural heritage, and the must-reads or the honors books, however you want to call them.
And, you know, a number of Ibbotson books were must-reads.
Absolutely, and all of the must-reads, as well as the award winners, have become part of our state library special collections. So
Where's that located? State House?
It's the 3rd floor of the State House. As a matter of fact, when you go in to the reading room, there is a display of all of the Mass books from the year 2000 on. And, you know, 100 years from now, people will be looking at these books and, you know, seeing what we thought were the books to be read each year.
So give me just a small smattering. I mean, this year I know as a poet, January O'Neill won the award, Poetry Award, right?
Yes.
And tell me about the others who won.
Oh, you're testing my my metal. Elizabeth Colbert wrote The Sixth Extinction. She's a wonderful writer, lives in Western Mass, and that was the nonfiction award winner. In picture books, we had a picture book award winner, as well as a middle grade young adult award winner. And in the middle grade young adult, we had Catherine Howe's Conversion, which is inspired by the Salem witch phenomenon and set in a prep school roughly in Danvers, Massachusetts. In picture books, and
Not
I'm
like
going to
St. Joseph's, I hope.
it was I can't remember the name that she named it a fictional name, but yeah, I think it had a saint in the title, you know. And in the picture books, the Paul Reynolds and Peter Reynolds collaboration, Going Places, was a really lively...
they were brothers, weren't they?
They are. They're twin brothers, and they run a fabulous company called Fable Vision. It's over in the Children's Museum building. They're very much about celebrating creativity in young kids, and that was the great book.
And then there was the nonfiction.
Nonfiction was Elizabeth Colbert. Celeste Ng, Cambridge writer. Everything I Never Told You was our fiction award winner, and poetry, you said, was January Gill O'Neill.
Okay, fine selection, fine poets and writers. Actually, it's interesting. The Colbert, I used to work at McLean Hospital with her husband for years. And,
really?
Yeah.
Now he's at
I don't know what he does now. I think he's a copywriter or something like that. He used to. He used to be in...
I thought he was at Williams College, but...
her husband is at Williams College? The one who wrote... She wrote her biography on who? Again?
No. She did The Sixth Extinction. She's also...
No, I'm talking about the one who wrote about the abolitionists.
Oh, that was Megan Marshall.
Yeah, Megan Marshall. I worked with her husband. Yeah. Was that the year before?
Her Margaret Fuller was the year before, and
I thought she was
actually
at the State House last fall.
Yes, because we combined 2 years celebration in the fall at the State House, and that had largely to do with...
she won the Pulitzer for that, right?
She did, and Elizabeth Colbert also won the Pulitzer for The Sixth Extinction. We have wonderful writers in this Commonwealth. I like to say that we named them first before the Pulitzers came out, but... I always admire what the judges find.
Did you ever, we had at the Endicott Visiting Author Series a Pulitzer Prize winner who lives in Wenham, Paul Harding. Did you ever have him?
Tinkers. You know, when that book came out, that came out with Bellevue Literary Press, if you remember, and they did not submit to us, and it was not on our radar screen. So I read it well after the fact. And his second book, which came out, I think, with Random House Knopf or something like that, we were aware of. But his first one was well after publication that I found it.
My good friend Kathleen Spivak has a book out from Knopf, just out, so hopefully she'll submit it. It's Unforgivable, I should know, Unforgivable Sins. I can't remember, but it's a good book about post-World War II New York and Bohemians living in it, so I'm hoping for that.
Cool.
Now, you have a great set of judges every year. I mean, can you name some of the judges you've had over the years?
Oh, well, your guest from last time, Ifanya Menkiti, was a poetry judge
Lloyd
one
Schwartz,
year.
I know, has been.
Lloyd was. Nick Flynn in poetry, and I know that you've been involved with him. We bring together a collection, a constellation of librarians, writers, and academics each year. So, boy, I'm trying to think. I'm drawing a blank right now on some of the more recent ones. But every year, I'm amazed by what we find. And when I'm reading, a lot of the books I don't read as they come in. I'm waiting to see what they do. And I'm always very proud of the collection.
You should be, yes. Now, speaking of books, what is your view of the physical book? Do you think it's going to be still around?
Well, I actually love the physical book, and I also love innovations in the material book. So I hope it stays around. I think that for conservation, we still haven't got it beat. I worked in publishing in Manhattan for a while, just at the time when hot type was going the way of the dinosaur. And I started my career at Harcourt Brace Jovanovich and was in the editorial and production course that they had for novices. And talking with some of the compositors about how much they missed hot type. And
could you just tell us what hot type is?
Well, it was the casting of type. It was the way it was before it kind of.
Oh, you mean like the metal things that go on the print? Yeah.
And so that the making of it was so apparent and manual in the book for them.
It was a craftsman.
It was a craft, yeah. And I remember at the time not really knowing what that meant, that nostalgia for things. As I've seen books morph and change, I think I start to understand it, the quality of the paper or the ink. I worry about some books, not because of what's in them, but because of what I think they might not hold up for a while.
Like acid-free paper.
Yeah. So in that way, I'm glad for digitization.
But I mean, I think I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I think the physical book is more conducive to deep reading. Do you think so?
Well, I think so, and some studies say it. But my husband, who is one of the most literate people I know, only likes to read on his, not even on a Kindle, on his phone.
Oh, I see.
So,
is your husband in publishing as well, or just out of interest?
No, he used to be. We started out together in writing and publishing, but he actually went very tech.
Oh, okay.
And he does business-to-business communications over the web. So, but anyway, so I think people can immerse themselves in the electronic book. I can't, but I like. You know what I use it for? There are a lot of out-of-print books from the 19th century that you can get and download to Kindle, and I read all of them.
And I know you're particularly interested in Edith Wharton, right?
Yeah, she's in print.
Yeah, I know she's in print, but I mean, you were talking about 19th century.
Yeah, she actually published only a couple of things in the 19th century.
Okay.
Unless she's an early 20th century writer. I don't think we think of her that way.
Yeah,
but,
she seems. Yeah. Tell me about your interest with Edith Wharton.
Oh, it goes back a long way. I'm a lapsed academic, I should say.
You're a what?
I call myself a lapsed academic. So I studied turn-of-the-century English and American literature. And, there are just writers you find and they speak to you. And she, as we were approaching the end of the 20th century, she was writing at the turn of the previous century. And I thought that fin de siècle sensibility was really current. I remember it was in 1994, actually, that the New Yorker called her this year's It Girl. That was when Scorsese just was coming out with The Age of Innocence, and she was very current. And I think still in the beginning of our 21st century, when you look back to what she was writing, she's writing through wars. She's writing about continentalism.
And she was daring. Once she left her husband, went off.
She was daring. She, visited the front. She was in Morocco in the 20s. She was a remarkable woman. But her fiction, I just think, is fantastic and interesting. And I was just spent a day at the Edith Wharton Conference in Washington last week, listening to a new generation.
You were the head of the society, weren't you, for something like that?
No, I was on the board. I was on the board, and I was the organizer for a couple of the conferences, one of them in Newport and one in London. Yeah.
So, but you're generally interested in women publishing in the 19th and 20th century.
Exactly.
Why is that?
Well, I worked in publishing and met a lot of women, really strong, independent women who were making their way in publishing. I didn't stay at Harcourt Brace Jovanovich for very long, and I went to a literary agency, and I worked for Helen Brann, who was the first woman to establish an independent literary agency in New York. I admired...
Helen Graham.
Brann,
okay.
Brann. She was Bob Parker's literary agent, a local, agent. So I saw this as an industry where women were having an impact and also finding opportunities. And when I was looking back, when I went back into a more academic look at publishing, I started looking at how women came of age in publishing, and it just was a subject near and dear to me. So the most recent thing I published was about Edith Wharton's interaction with her editors. I'm very much interested in the way books come to market. Yeah.
Are you familiar with our author at Endicott College, Charlotte Gordon?
Oh yeah, she was two
She just won the
she won the National Book Critic
Award. Yeah.
Circle's Award for the Romantic Outlaws.
Yeah.
And she was an honors award winner, something like 03 or 06.
Yeah,
she's lovely. I like her. I see her at the Newburyport Literary Festival often. She'll be presenting there.
Yeah. She lives in Gloucester. Now, you were involved, or still are involved, in creating a literary map of Massachusetts?
Yes, I am. We have now archived and interpreted about 300 literary sites in Massachusetts.
The Somerville one?
When you said we had one in every city and town, I started to desperately think about what was in Somerville. And I need to say, we made this very much site-based, not author-based. So we don't have just so-and-so was born in a place or so-and-so. We looked for places that were marked on the map. So we have a lot of sites in and around Harvard Square.
I can't now, the names escape me, but the one that was just recently a movie about, Daniel, he had psychiatric problems, but there was a movie made about him. I'm trying to, he sort of a revolutionary way of writing and long, I'm trying to, well, it'll come to me later. But he was here, and a lot of writers were.
Well, if we can find where he lived and document it, then it goes on the map.
Yeah.
And we started out, with
Daniel Foster Wallace.
David Foster Wallace.
David Foster Wallace. He lived in Somerville for a while.
For very long?
Not for very long, but he did.
If we could find it, we would definitely put it on the map, because I know people have talked about the impact on the writing community that he had. A lot of people breeze through this area because of all the schools, and I think you could get into having sort of
Yeah, he was going to Harvard at the time.
sites,
Yeah, philosophy.
That would be certainly something to mark.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we had this goal to come up with 100 sites, visitable sites in Massachusetts. And we had a board of 6 people, and we were all assigned different regions. And within a couple of months, we were saying, gee, do you think we can limit it to 100 sites? We wound up with 249 on a draft 2D map. And boy, it was unreadable. So we're now putting it all online. And we're starting to cut literary trails. We have one being done around Beacon Hill. And we have another one being done that we're I don't know what the title exactly is going to be called, but we're calling it Abolition and the Book to get started. And what I want this to eventually develop into is writing and social justice. And so we'll have a lot of overlapping trails.
Now, being a resident of Arlington, I wonder if you know my friend, the poet laureate of Arlington, Miriam Levine?
I do, actually. She is my neighbor.
Really?
And she lives on Academy, and I brought...
Tell her to say hello. All right.
She's wonderful. You know, she's been doing a lot to promote poetry in town, and she's also a wonderful gardener. You must know that. And so I see her often in her garden, tending her garden with her hat.
She's a Somerville bagel bard for many years now. You know the bagel bards?
I do know the bagel bards, but I did not know that she was.
Yeah, she is.
Well, come someday.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. And so I would, you've got about 7 minutes. I'd like you to read maybe some work, poetry or whatever, excerpts from whatever. Actually, you talked. This is self-serving because I published her, but Molly Lynn Watt's book. Wings of Song.
I was going to go back to, I wanted to say something about the books that get selected, the honors books.
All right, she wasn't, she was nominated by us.
Yes,
but
yes. I think that, when you think about awards and you wonder why do books get awards, I think that when you look at the award winners, it's very clear that there's something... a broader appeal, lasting impact. And then what I find interesting is then looking at the books that have been shortlisted or longlisted. What are the books that people are saying, I know a lot of people would want to read this book. And for this readership, the readership thinking about libraries and book groups, I've noticed there's a trend in poetry that books that have a strong thematic unity or a narrative thrust are the ones that come to the fore. And so I was thinking about Catherine Zazanov's Had Slaves. It was a collection that she wrote as she was trying to work out her feelings about finding out that her family in Missouri, I think it was, had been slave owners.
Martha Collins also wrote books about slavery. Blue Front or Cold Front, Blue Front, I think it was.
And for some reason, that book did not come into the book awards the year that it was published. I found that was another book I found later. But Molly Lynn Watt's on Wings of Song, I was thinking, really fit into this as well, a journey into the civil rights era. And I was wondering, because you published it, I was going to ask you, what appealed to you about this book? What was memorable for you?
Well, I just think that her experience was very very interesting. She was very committed, and she went down there with her children. She was thrown in jail with her children. The place was burnt. Where she was staying with the activists. She was part of a very historic movement. Especially now with all this,
Yeah, and I think that that we need to do something about this because you're doing it in poetry and other of our local presses are doing it in nonfiction or fiction, capturing the oral histories of people who experienced that. And it would be great for us to get a panel sometime together to have these people in conversation with one another across genres about the experience.
Should I send a note to Merritt to contact you?
Absolutely.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So anyway, I love these books that have thematic thrust. And you mentioned January Gil O'Neill's Misery Islands, which I actually love. You know that the title comes from...
It's an island in Salem, off the coast of Salem.
Two islands off the coast of...
Salem, right?
Yeah. Salem or Beverly, yeah, in that North Shore area, yeah. And one is called Little Misery, and the other is called Great Misery. And I love the way she lets that become the title of the book. It so much links the book with place, and so I like that very much. But her book also had a kind of an experiential arc, and I know that the judges really responded to that, the progress of the speaker through those experiences. For me, when I see the books that have come to the shortlist, I am delighted sometimes by the surprising things I find. And so I wanted to read one from very early on. This is Dugan from Poem 7.
He's out in Provincetown, isn't he?
He was.
Yeah, he died recently?
He died a while back, but he was an early award winner in poetry. And I was looking through the book, getting ready for the awards event, and I came upon, and I'm reading this in a very self-serving way, a poem in favor of a free public library system.
Okay.
So, sometimes disturbed people go to the public library and shout their secrets into the silence. One may shout, "They say I'm schizophrenic. What the hell does that mean?" Or else, "My husband says I'm frigid. How do I look that up?" Then the readers look up from their reading, sanely disturbed, and often some well-read person starts talking quietly with them. Or else a compassionate librarian shows them the way to the catalog. Then the library returns to the silence of its function, the transmission of the words of the past, in the presence of the dust motes moving in the single sunbeam coming down from the window to the checkout desk. And if you think those dust motes are dancing like stars and are metaphors for some universal order or chaos, well, don't panic, keep quiet, don't start shouting for meaningful advice from some well-read person. Ask a compassionate librarian to show you the way to the American poetry section, where under 811D or DUG, you'll find in my collected poems the palliative answer to your stupid questions, and the answer as to why that liar Nietzsche wrote, "I don't like poets, they lie."
Well, thank you for that. That's a great poem.
It's wonderful, and it's funny, and it's also about literary heritage, right? I mean, he's imagining his books on the shelves and in the future.
Well, we're out of town.
Into the future. Yeah.
Thank you for a great interview.
Yeah.
We're out of time right now, but thanks again for coming.
Thank you.